FBI raid. President Donald Trump is furious about what he says is abuse of attorney-client privilege. Face to face. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg is on Capitol Hill, and lawmakers want to know how he will protect users' privacy. Message of mercy. Pope Francis meets with nearly 600 priests from around the world. We'll talk to one of them. And Crimson in the house. The Alabama football team and its Catholic coach are at the White House. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, April 10th, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. The United States calls on the international community to strongly condemn an apparent chemical weapons attack on civilians in Syria. Top diplomats at the United Nations are mobilizing to find out who's responsible for the deaths of dozens of men, women, and children. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reports from the State Department. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. State Department spokesperson Heather Nauert says the U.S. can and will do everything to hold the culprits accountable. She says if the Syrian government did launch toxic gas on its own citizens, the United Nations must respond. Once again, we need to warn you, the video you are about to see may be disturbing. By now, the world has seen the horrifying images after the alleged attack Saturday in the Damascus suburbs. Today, plumes of smoke billow in the same neighborhood where Syrian government forces halted their assault. Syrian state media have released video of civilians who allegedly escaped captivity by the rebels fighting the government. But UN Ambassador Nikki Haley blames Syrian President Bashar Assad.
Only a monster does this. Only a monster targets civilians and then ensures that there are no ambulances to transfer the wounded, no hospitals to save their lives, no doctors or medicine to ease their pain.
Haley says Russia has blood on their hands for their support of the Assad regime. Russia's foreign minister denies the reports, saying their forces are in the Damascus suburb of Doma and haven't found any trace of chemicals. President Trump isn't satisfied and hasn't ruled out a military response.
We are very concerned when a thing like that can happen. This is about humanity. We're talking about humanity. And it can't be allowed to happen.
Britain's Theresa May and Germany's Angela Merkel offered similar statements today. The president of Turkey, who had recently agreed to work closely with Russia in Syria, has voiced his concerns to Russian President Vladimir Putin. The civil war in Syria has impacted every sector of society, including the country's Christians, which now number only 450,000. Just last week, an Orthodox archbishop in Syria told Aid to the Church in Need, a Catholic charity, about half of the Christian population have fled his country since the start of the war. He says Christians feel like strangers in their own country after 7 years of internal strife. Lauren.
Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reporting from the State Department. Thank you, Wyatt. President Trump will not attend an upcoming summit in Peru. Instead, he's staying in Washington to monitor the situation in Syria. The president this weekend was set to attend the Summit of the Americas in Lima, then was headed to Bogota, Colombia. The vice president will travel to Peru in his place. Meanwhile, President Trump has been mulling over firing special counsel Robert Mueller. His anger was stoked after an FBI raid of his personal attorney's office. Agents seized records connected to the president's alleged affair with an adult film star before he was elected. The president denies that affair and calls the Russia probe a witch hunt. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. This raid was reportedly ordered in part on a referral from special counsel Robert Mueller, who is investigating possible collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign. The president's personal attorney, Michael Cohen, has come under scrutiny in Mueller's probe. President Trump calls the investigation a disgrace.
It's an attack on our country in a true sense. It's an attack on what we all stand for.
Special counsel Robert Mueller reportedly pushed for the raid of Michael Cohen's office. The court gave the FBI permission to seize documents without notice. President Trump claims the raid was a violation of his rights to have communication with his lawyer kept private. He tweets, "Attorney-client privilege is dead." Some of the documents may give insight into the alleged payment made to adult film star Stormy Daniels. She claims Trump's lawyer paid her $130,000 to keep silent about an affair with the president in 2006. The president denies the affair and says he didn't know about the payment. But Stormy Daniels' attorney says the raid may indicate Cohen tried to cover up the nature of the payment.
We have substantial reason to believe that when Michael Cohen opened the bank accounts at First Republic Bank for the purposes of wiring this money, that he was not truthful and honest with the bank as to the purpose of those accounts and what they were designed to be used for.
Yesterday evening, the president thought openly about firing special counsel Robert Mueller.
Why don't I just fire Mueller? Well, I think it's a disgrace what's going on. We'll see what happens, but I think it's really a sad situation when you look at what happened. And many people have said you should fire him. Again, they found nothing.
Some Republican lawmakers urge President Trump not to fire Mueller.
I think it would be suicide for the president to fire him. I think the less the president says about this whole thing, the better off he will be.
Another question remains, if the president isn't planning on firing Mueller, is he willing to sit down for an interview with the special counsel? It's not clear if he'll agree to it. Now, I just spoke in person to the president's senior advisor, Kellyanne Conway. I asked if the president is less likely to do an interview after the raid of his attorney's office. Conway did not answer and quickly changed the subject. Lauren.
White House correspondent Mark Irons. Thank you, Mark. Joining me now is Mary Walter, co-host of Mornings on the Mall. Mary, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Robert Mueller and the president are continuing the fisticuffs. The president says that this probe is an attack on the U.S. How much longer can special counsel Robert Mueller continue this investigation without getting fired?
Well, I don't think the president's going to fire him. I don't see that happening. He said repeatedly he's not going to, and he's kind of in a situation where he's damned if he does and he's damned if he doesn't. So I don't see that happening. But Robert Mueller has a bottomless pot of money. He has taxpayer wallets. He's investigating things that have nothing to do with Russia, nothing to do with collusion. The Stormy Daniels thing. I mean, it happened in 2006, allegedly. Why now? Why, and the signing of the NDA in 2016, and now all of a sudden they come through, and now we're investigating that.
So let's talk about that. That is the other big news coming out of the White House, and President Trump, as Mark Irons reported, said attorney-client privilege is dead. However, I don't understand why Michael Cohen was raided in the first place. He has been cooperating with investigations into this. Why do this in such a public and heavy-handed way?
I think it's politically motivated. It's the same reason they raided Paul Manafort. I mean, there was never a raid with Watergate. How come all of a sudden we're seeing all these raids? Because you're absolutely right. Cohen's been very forthcoming. They've given them everything that they wanted. This is for politics. This is for show. This, in my humble opinion, is not this is a politically motivated investigation, and this is going to go into 2020 because this is about keeping President Trump from being reelected. That's what this is about.
President Trump also has Syria to deal with. We saw the horrific pictures of those children in that gas attack, that chemical gas attack that Bashar al-Assad says he did not do. Russia is now saying to the United States, hey, stay out of this. Don't bomb Syria. The president is said to be mulling this over. Are we at the end of our diplomatic relations?
I don't know the answer to that because I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but I think the addition of John Bolton is fantastic right now. I mean, him coming in, what a first day at work, right? Like, what a great first day at work coming into this. I think John Bolton was very smart. He's a very, very smart man. He is so entrenched in world affairs that having him on the team at this point, I think is going to give the president some really good guidance on how to respond to this.
Yes, many people say he's a hawk, though. I mean, he wants to bomb. And the president, is he going to listen this time to a military advisor? He's had issues with military advisors in the past and has let several of them go.
I think the reason the president has been so successful in private life and in his private businesses is he surrounds himself with people who question him. He's not surrounded by yes men. And I think he is smart in the people in which he appoints to be around him. And I think he takes, input from all around him and then makes his own decision from that. So I think, he's surrounded himself with some good people right now.
And what about support from our allies? Are we going to see support in Syria? You do believe?
Oh, I do. Yeah, all right. I really believe we'll see support. It's atrocious. It's genocide. It is a horrible, terrible thing that was happening. And for Assad to say, oh, it wasn't me. Oh, yeah, okay. Sure, it wasn't you.
Mary Walter, co-host of Mornings on the
Yes.
Mall, broadcast here in Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg faces a 2-day interrogation in Congress. Today, senators confront the 33-year-old billionaire about the massive privacy scandal affecting tens of millions of people who use the company's social media site. Correspondent Jason Calvi joins us from the skybox above the hearing. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. Lawmakers behind me are asking Zuckerberg, how in the world did an outside company sweep up information from 87 million Facebook users, and what can be done going forward to protect their privacy? Zuckerberg is apologizing in an effort to avoid government regulation and to restore public trust in his company.
It was my mistake, and I'm sorry.
For the first time in his career, Mark Zuckerberg testifies before Congress.
It will take some time to work through all the changes we need to make across the company, but I'm committed to getting this right.
The public apology comes after revelations that Cambridge Analytica, a data mining firm affiliated with Donald Trump's presidential campaign, gathered personal information from nearly 90 million users to try to influence the election. Some say Facebook should charge to protect privacy. Democrat Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut says that is not an option.
For Facebook to charge, make people pay for privacy, I think would be abominable. They've talked about it, but they make a lot of money by monetizing people's personal information, and they should use some of that money to protect privacy.
Mississippi Republican Roger Wicker tells us he's open to some government regulation, but has a warning.
It is a part of the great economy that we have today, in 2018, and to put a bunch of regulations on it that are unnecessary or overburdensome, to me, is something that we ought to be careful.
Julian Sanchez is a senior fellow with the Cato Institute, a think tank favoring limited government regulation. Sanchez says Facebook failed its users.
If you want users to make meaningful choices about whether a company has effectively protected their privacy, they need to know when that privacy is breached. And so requiring Facebook to inform users when information is shared in violation of their terms would help to do that.
Many Catholics use Facebook to ask for prayers, to inspire themselves and others, and to share their faith. Just for example, this recent EWTN News Nightly post with a photo of St. John Paul II, it reached more than 1 million people. Now tomorrow, it's the House's turn to grill the man behind me, Mark Zuckerberg. Lauren?
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi, excellent reporting. Thank you, Jason. Border Patrol says a new 20-mile wall along the U.S.-Mexico border will protect the country.
The wall that we're replacing this fencing with is going to be durable. It's going to be here for a long time. It's going to be harder to get over, harder to get through, harder to get underneath.
The groundbreaking took place yesterday in southern New Mexico. The wall will cost $73 million. China's president promises to cut its auto tariffs and improve intellectual property protection in possible concessions aimed at diffusing a trade war. The announcement sent stock markets higher in both countries. It also eased fears of a trade war. Beijing and Washington had threatened billions of dollars of tariffs on each other's goods. Officials say the daughter of an ex-Russian spy poisoned in England last month has been discharged from the hospital. Her father, also poisoned from a nerve agent made in Russia, continues to make progress. Moscow denies involvement. The number of Christians living in the Gaza Strip has plummeted. The pastor of the territory's only Catholic church blames living conditions. Father Mario da Silva says there are 1,000 Christians in the area, down from more than 4,000 in 2012. He likens daily life to an open-air prison. For more on this story, including how Catholics in the area celebrated Easter, visit our partners at CatholicNewsAgency.com. A Catholic leader in Congo says gunmen killed a parish priest after a mass in Congo. Armed gunmen reportedly killed Father Etienne while he was eating. The killing comes a week after another priest was kidnapped after celebrating Easter Sunday Mass. He has been released. Roman Catholic churches and activists have led nationwide demonstrations this year against Congolese President Joseph Kabila. Coming up, the reaction on campus after a student at a Catholic college publicly supports church teaching on marriage. And Good Friday Agreement. We look back at a historic meeting that sought to end a conflict involving Catholics and Protestants. Mississippi's only abortion clinic expands its challenge of a state law that bans abortion after 15 weeks. It's the most restrictive abortion law in the U.S. The clinic now wants to block several provisions that have been legal for years, and that includes a 24-hour waiting period for an abortion. The state of Alabama is appealing a ruling that overturned a pro-life law. That law allows a judge to appoint a lawyer for an unborn baby when a minor is seeking an abortion. It also lets the court decide whether the minor is mature enough to go through with it. The law passed in 2014 but was struck down 3 years later. A student at a U.S. Catholic college tells me he's under attack for promoting the church's teaching on marriage. The senior at Providence College in Rhode Island, who is a resident assistant in a dorm, put up this bulletin board. It says, marriage the way God intended it. One man, one woman. Campus and administration reaction to that display has raised questions of free speech and the duty of Catholic colleges and universities to promote and defend church teaching. We're joined now by Michael Smolanskis from Providence, Rhode Island. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
What was your first indication that people were upset?
All sorts of things happened. As soon as I put up the board, fellow RAs, my coworkers, started texting me saying I was being discriminatory. For a few nights, people showed up in my building. The board, I think a total now, was torn down 5 times and put back up every time. I was slandered all over social media. People called for me to be fired. There was a protest, an anti-homophobia protest, as they called it, in response to the board. The whole campus was really up in arms over this.
What was the initial response from the college?
There was very little response. I had a meeting with administrators, the vice president for student affairs, the vice president of mission and ministry, and the school's legal counsel. And I asked them to do, some simple things. One was to quickly denounce the hatred and the threats of harassment, to affirm the mission of the college, and to affirm freedom of speech, and they would do none of those things. Initially, they were extremely hesitant to act at all.
Providence College President Father Brian Shanley did issue 2 notes, and in the second one to the student body, it denounced the hostility directed at you and said you were entitled to the same respect, charity, and protection that is due any student. Following that, the Bishop of Providence, Thomas Tobin, weighed in, saying prudence is also a virtue that we always need to practice in expressing our Catholic beliefs in a secular, hostile world. How did you take those responses?
I was very disappointed by the president's communication. He very quickly characterized anybody who's concerned about Catholic mission as uncharitable and accusatory. I was very affirmed by the bishop's letter. He really has his finger on the pulse of what the issue is, and while he said the school is at a crossroads, I think he's right, but I would add to that I think it's gone down one of the crossroads, not for the better. And it really needs to take a step back and reevaluate.
When you chose Providence, a Catholic college, did you expect there would be this division in the student body?
I didn't, and it's gotten worse over my 4 years here. What we're seeing at Providence College now, and I suspect at other schools, is that we're concerned that Catholic teaching isn't even safe on campus. You have, like I said, a progressive group of students who consider church teaching to be hate speech, and in this case considered homophobic. And so the real concern is that Catholic teaching is under assault. and it's not safe, and the people who espouse it are not safe on campus.
What about those who say, hey, these are our First Amendment rights? Just because the college is Catholic doesn't mean we can't express our views.
They have a right to protest. That is their freedom of speech in this country. But the college has an obligation to endorse certain positions. And so when Father Shanley wants to toe a middle line, and he seems to be more interested in appeasing the LGBTQ community rather than standing with church teaching, he's really doing a disservice, because the students are being lied to and told that Catholicism could be watered down to a series of vague platitudes about love and welcoming, and the content of the faith is then vilified.
Michael Smolanskis, a student at Providence College. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Up next, Finding Peace. We remember a historic agreement for Northern Ireland 20 years later. And Victory Tour. The Alabama football team receives an honor in Washington.
But I want to say this to the politicians and to the people of Northern Ireland with all the force that I can muster. Even now, this will not work unless in your will and in your mind you make it work.
Today marks 20 years since former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair brokered the Good Friday Agreement in Northern Ireland. The deal largely ended 3 decades of violence between Catholics and Protestants. Pope Francis calls for unity in the Catholic Church and blames its divisions on the devil.
Noi siamo convinti che l'unità è superiore al conflitto.
The Holy Father made the comments during a Mass he celebrated along with 550 missionaries of mercy. That's the army of priests he formed during his Jubilee of Mercy to highlight the sacrament of reconciliation around the globe. Father John Paul Mary, a priest with the Franciscan Missionaries of the Eternal Word, took part in the meeting and the Mass and met the Pope. He joins us from Rome. What did the Pope say today?
Well, the Pope had a private meeting with us today and also celebrated Mass with us.
I heard that you shook the Pope's hand today.
She shook all 600 of our hands. It was awesome. He stood there and we all shook his hands. And that's, I think, the encounter that Pope Francis wants to facilitate with people, with us. And he took time just to shake each one of our hands and to really look at us and just to have that grandfatherly look. It was really quite an experience.
As a missionary of mercy, what exactly is your role? What is he tasking you with?
He's tasking us really to convey to people the mercy of God, that God is close. I think so many people think that God is so far away. So many people think that they can't be forgiven. And the Pope wants people to realize that God is close and that they can come to people, to priests in confession, particularly to missionaries of mercy. And he wants us to convey to people the closeness of God, that God wants to embrace us, to forgive us.
Is this a best friend kind of closeness? Is that what you think he's talking about, as opposed to God up in heaven?
Yeah, I think a lot of people think that heaven is so far away, that heaven is some distant galaxy. But heaven really begins here now. Through our baptism, he talked about this in his homily today. He talked about the regeneration or rebirth, and that the sacraments bring us really eternal life now. So we really participate now in eternal life.
Tell our audience where missionaries of mercy are throughout the world, throughout the United States. How would I know to come to a missionary of mercy?
Well, there are missionaries of mercy throughout the world. Now there are 895, I think, missionaries of mercy. And in the United States, there are 140 missionaries of mercy.
And you're based at EWTN headquarters in Birmingham, Alabama, correct? You're far from home.
Yeah, I am. I flew here to Rome a few days ago, and I've been constantly at meetings the last 3 days, and it's been wonderful.
Well, lucky you. Thank you so much for joining us, Father John Paul Mary with the Franciscan Missionaries of the Eternal Word.
God bless you.
And in more Alabama news, finally tonight, There is at least some crimson in the White House. The Alabama Crimson Tide, that is.
And we're proud to once again call the University of Alabama our national champions. Thank you, and roll Tide.
Alabama won the football national championship in January. It was the 5th title for coach Nick Saban. The university's Catholic Student Center is named for Saban and his wife, Terry. And I have to tell you, there are a lot of people at EWTN headquarters in Birmingham, Alabama, who are mighty happy about that win. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook. Good night and God bless.